Pretty simple this year. We made changes to the purchase agreement, the listing contract, and of course that's both improved and unimproved. You know, we've got two sets of contracts there. And then there was one new form that they created. So and usually every year the major changes are on our purchase agreement, and then the listing agreement, and then we deal with some other forms usually. So first change is, instead of something saying dollars, it's now going to say US dollars. And that change, I guess, is because of Bitcoin and other currencies. So, right. So they're going to show you the changes on this slide presentation and then tell you the rationale, the reason behind it. And then the second one, there's a phrase that says for use only by members of the Indiana Association of Realtors, so we can discourage copyright violations from non-members. Okay, first change on the purchase agreement. Again, it says where we changed to US dollars. And then the other change is under cash transactions, we added 2 boxes to select whether the buyer will or will not have an appraisal. Okay, that wasn't on our form previously. And the reason is to specify the payment we made in US dollars. And I think the rationale on this other one's on the next slide. No, that was it. But to have an appraisal, because right now our form basically states every transaction is entitled to an appraisal. So if you had a cash offer, and say you had multiple offer situation, and the buyer wanted their offer to be stronger and said it's cash, no appraisal, you would have had to have written that in. And people didn't always do that, and there was confusion, or all of a sudden an appraisal pops up and the seller didn't think there was an appraisal, and maybe he wouldn't have accepted that offer over another. So I think this is a good change. They put language to buyers should consult one or more insurance agents regarding optional or additional coverage, and the reason was to lessen liability for realtors and brokers in case the buyer thinks they weren't informed of that possibility. Under inspections, instead of check appropriate paragraph number, it's just check 1. And the reason is the 3 choices, only 1 should be selected. Somebody must have been selecting more than 1. Yeah. Okay, purchase agreement, buyers have been made aware that independent inspections disclosing the condition of the property may be conducted, not are available. So they just changed the language to clarify that the buyer will need to have inspections done if they want inspections. If you have any questions while I'm going, make sure I'm not going too fast.
Back with the inspections, I'm presuming that if it's a cash offer on it, auction, it's obvious that there's no inspection, but you're still going to be marking that on an auction.
It just depends if you need a purchase agreement, or, I mean, if you want inspections, like lamps, you can have inspections on an auction, can't you?
You could, but we tell them they can't, and we put that in the contract.
Oh, okay.
As is.
And his contract probably takes precedence over what's in the purchase
I
agreement?
just can't write it in at the end.
It's right in.
Yeah.
That answer your question? Okay.
Pam, are these changes on the forms now?
No, they're not. January 1st. Okay? I don't know, 2nd or the 1st.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're not there now, so we didn't print anything for you because there's nothing to print. Okay, and then it notes all these same changes are made on the unimproved property form. Okay, this is probably the biggest change. The whole page or area that talks about inspections, they reformatted the whole thing to try to make it simpler. You know, it was kind of mumble jumbled before. They tried to break it down into sections. And you, I don't know if any of you realize this, you do have this in an email that came from the Indiana Association maybe a month ago or so, and it's in a PDF form. If you search your email, you can find it. This morning I just put forms in, and it was about the third thing that came up, you know, under the search. So you can read all this. I'm not going to read it all to you, but everything that's there now, they just reorganized it. The legal staff did that on their own. They looked at it, and they have access to contracts from all the states in the country and everything, and so they just said this will make it easier for a buyer to read, easier for us to explain to people. Do you want to take a second and read that? It's the same language as we had before, unless you see a red somewhere, like shall be. That's the only thing that's been added or changed. So here's the rest of it. So towards the end, it talks about the initial inspection period and the scope of the inspection. But they tried to do A's and B's and everything sectioned out. And again, if you see it, when you see it, you'll see it looks much more organized and easier to understand. Okay, they added, this is important. If an inspection report reveals a defect in the property, the buyer must provide the inspection report or relevant parts thereof to the seller. And two, this is the important part that was added, give the seller the opportunity to remedy the defect. Our old purchase agreement really didn't state that, you know. The other things are the same. Again, they talk about response, about the definition of a defect, and about previously disclosed defects. Any questions?
What if you don't, if the buyer doesn't agree with the remedy the seller wants to offer?
Well, that's a different point after the fact, but at least you're, the seller, they have to give the seller an opportunity to make the repair. Our other contracts weren't as clear, and a buyer could just say, I don't want the property, but they haven't, but the seller would have remedied something. You know, haven't you ever run into that before? I have, you know. It's been a problem in the past. So most of these changes are something that's been a problem in the past, especially the Lisa hotline. They talk about all the complaints or issues that have come up, and those are considered seriously. We've got like 4 attorneys on that group, and then the attorneys talk about the lawsuits they've had throughout the year, because they're all real estate attorneys. So, and this is one of them. Let's see. Well, here's the reasons. To make the section more logical and easier to read, clarify that a request for more time to respond should be in writing, clarify that the inspection report must actually reveal a defect rather than the buyer reasonably believing that it does. They took that reasonable believing language out. It clearly states that the buyer must give the seller an opportunity to repair the defect, and the buyer must provide the seller with a relevant portion of the inspection report. Okay?
Pam,
Mm-hmm.
sorry,
That's all right.
because I assume the slide where it talked about line 174, 175, whatever it was part of the contract where it says buyer shall reserve the right to have inspections, but it was clearly ahead of that. So can you back up just a little bit?
What now?
Go back a couple slides.
Okay.
Right there. Independent inspections, where I assume that was just in the section where they're getting inspections. This precedes all that.
No, I think this is right after this, because,
Well, that says 181.
181 to 223 is how they reformatted everything.
Right, but those were 170 something.
So that was before this,
Right.
there's this paragraph that says, instead of the inspections are available, it says may be conducted. They changed, that's what they changed. Whatever's in red is what they changed, where they crossed out.
Okay.
Okay, to clarify that buyer will need to have inspections done if they want them.
Okay.
Not that they're already available, that's what it made it sound like. It's just, it was the language wasn't clear. And all they changed in that was that shall be, and added 1 and 2 there. So those are the reasons. And you, in an email from the state, you have this exact PowerPoint, so you can review this. And it's real simple to review if you ever have any questions. Now, okay, and again, they just, same language, they just tried to make it simpler to understand about taxes and assessments. So the reasons are the lines are separated and asterisks are added to highlight this section to make it easier to read. Okay, that language is still there and it's still the same, it's just reformatted. Okay. This is about homeowners associations. So they added the red language, brokers are not responsible, it's about the covenants, restrictions, and all that. So you're not responsible for verifying or interpreting this information. The parties agree that the brokers and their companies shall be released and held harmless from any and all liability arising out of or related to these documents. And the reason is to lessen the liability of a broker in case buyer makes a claim that broker provided them incorrect information about the contents of the HOA documents, and to provide broker with a hold harmless agreement. And I think, I don't know if any of you have had problems with this, but in some portions of the state, especially in Indianapolis, they've had some issues with this.
Well, just the interpreting part, they want us to interpret it, and I've had a problem, I'm not.
And our purchase agreement says the seller is to provide that information to the buyer. It doesn't say we as brokers, but again, evidently in interpreting some of it and claiming some of it wasn't correct, or they got the wrong information from the seller, they want to blame a realtor. So none of this prevents us from getting sued, but it helps.
Yeah, but if the seller and the buyer aren't in touch with each other because they're going through us as brokers, we gotta make sure they know how to go
Well,
get that information.
in actuality, we get the information, very rarely does it come directly from the seller. A lot of times maybe the details about the fees and everything from the homeowners you might get directly from the seller. We usually help the seller with that, but it's ultimately the seller's responsibility in the transaction that the buyer gets that information. But because we're so involved in that, I think there's been some legal issues where they want to blame us if the buyer doesn't get the right information, you know.
If we're representing the buyer, it's our obligation.
And it's your obligation as a buyer's agent to make sure that's correct too. But you don't want to get sued. Okay, that was purchase agreement. So that's it on the purchase agreement, you know, no big heavy changes. So, now on the listing contract, they're taking the date off the listing contract.
Wow.
Yeah, the date at the top, there's gonna be no date. The reason is the date was removed from the top of the form to avoid confusion as to when the listing begins. Because you could have made it out and they could have signed it a different date, or earlier date than what the actual listing contract starts. So that's to help avoid some confusion there. I thought that was kind of smart. Okay, and this is about people that may be in arrears in their payments. Says the seller is or is not delinquent, and then seller represents that the total loans affecting the property do or do not exceed the list price. Reason is the questions were separated into two different questions. They didn't used to be. I think it was all one question, so it's a little more clear. This is important. Seller is or is not a foreign person. The lines were separated again, and the lettering bolded to make it easier to read. This was important to the title companies. They came to us with this. There have been some serious lawsuits, not against us, against the title companies, because somebody got away with selling a property, they were a foreign person, they owed tax, and then the buyer owes that tax if that wasn't found. So it's an issue for the title companies. They have to be very careful to make sure that seller is not a foreign person that owes taxes, because they've been sued. And you know, and the contract hopefully help them to determine. in the process, if they, you know, they should read this, but if they have any questions, then it's up to the title company to ask for some proof, you know, of citizenship, so people aren't owed extra taxes, so, but there's been some serious lawsuits on that.
You talking about over and above property taxes?
Right, right. A foreign person may or may not owe additional taxes when they sell a property.
Why would that hurt the buyer?
Because if it's not paid at closing, if the title company doesn't catch it, the new owner is responsible for those taxes. And when the new owners,
Attached to the property.
when the new owners find out a month or two later they're being billed for all these taxes, then they get very upset. And they sue the title company. Okay. Again, HOA information was added to the listings. HOA management company, oh, this is important, may require payment from the seller prior to issuing verification of good standing and or transfer of ownership. A lot of the HOAs, and something like especially in Indy, were not requiring information if they were current on their HOA payments. Excuse me. Or they wanted people to be current before they would issue a letter verifying that. So that's been added to the listing agreement. A warning to seller that some HOA management companies may require this payment prior to closing. So it's come up prior to closing. Some of it's been substantial money, and there's been some real issues getting, that sellers didn't want to pay it, or it held up closing.
So in the case that you have a property that, let's say went into foreclosure, but their HOA, money's owed, this is basically to, cover a management company, so that they get their payment, but if you're in a, foreclosure kind of situation and they're not able to pay that, what happens? At that point, they just won't release?
Or you won't have clear title if it doesn't get paid. Most banks or foreclosures, those sellers are pretty anal about that fee. They know it'll interfere with the closing and they pay it. But, you know, if you can't get clear title, if it's not clear, you won't have a closing. But this is saying they can hold up our closing unless they get payment. So this is a warning to sellers that that can happen.
I guess my thinking is, can that be arranged, now we get to the management company, can something be arranged with the management company in the event a person that's selling it, that's in a free or foreclosure state cannot afford to pay back fees? That's something we can maybe arrange with the management company to pay it at close?
I doubt it. They don't care. They want their money, and they can hold up the closing if it doesn't get paid out of the closing proceeds.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it can be arranged to be paid out of closing, perhaps.
I don't know. Every situation is different, but I doubt it. Everybody understand what she's asking?
Yeah, I think you'd be able to pay it out of closing.
Pardon?
Sure you'd be able to pay it out of closing.
Yeah, you'd be able to pay it out of closing.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
It says prior to.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're saying they won't issue a letter. Some of them will not issue a letter that everything's in good standing until they're paid. They want it before closing.
Exactly.
Yeah, they
And
want it
that
before
was-
closing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
They would probably accept a letter from the title
That's
company,
right.
who'd be receiving it at closing.
That's what I'm thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But some sellers have acted surprised that they can't close or get a letter to clear the close for this if they haven't paid. Okay, oh, this is a change. This is about audio or video recordings in houses. Sellers setting up so they can hear what the buyer is saying. Or buyers taking pictures, says to warn the seller about potential liability when recordings are used and provide a hold harmless to us, for such potential improper use. There are laws that say they can't record, but in reality they do. And this is a warning to them of, they may be breaking the law and shouldn't do it, but they still do it. Might read all that. And know that purchasers may be videoing. And then tells them to remove their personal items, for liability again. That's what's important. Then, they suggest adding this to buyers, to your office policy that you give to buyers by agency, that you should warn the buyers that the owner may be recording them. And that they hold us harmless from any liability for that. Okay? See, a lot of these changes that happen every year have to do with technology and how things change. And so we try to change our contract to go along with how things are really happening, you know, with technology. Okay, and this is a new form that was added because of Code of Ethics that added something to comply with the Standard of Practice 1-7. It says, upon written request of a cooperating broker who submits an offer to a listing broker, the listing broker shall provide a written affirmation to the cooperating broker stating that the offer has been submitted to the seller, or written notification that the seller has waived the obligation to have the offer presented. So if a buyer's agent requests, you know, verification that their offer's been presented, you know, sometimes we don't know. This says that the listing broker has to provide something in writing that answers that. So that's what this form will be. I don't think they provided the form. No, they didn't. You'll be able to see the form January 1st. So you only need it if the buyer's agent asks for it, okay? So it says you have to, under the Code of Ethics, provide in writing whether that offer's been accepted or whether the seller could say, I don't even want to look at it. It's possible, but it has to give that information. Okay?
I'm sorry, the prior form, was that also added to what form? The prior,
That is
Yes.
supposed to be added to your office policy, agency policy that you present to
Got it.
buyers. Okay?
okay, so
Warning them that,
this is not on any standard form?
no, they just
This is
suggested,
a recommendation?
that's a recommendation
Got it.
that you add that to your office policy. Okay? And then this new form's not mandatory, it's only if it's requested by the other agent. So, and it reminds you, if you have any legal issues, the Lisa hotline, that's for your broker to use, but go to your broker and say, I need to know, we need an answer to a legal question, and they're always on staff for that. But remember, whatever you email to me, if you have concerns about changes that you think should be made, it gets forwarded to them and it gets put on our agenda. We meet once a year. It's the best committee in the world to be on. one meeting a year. I've been on this committee since 2007 when we changed to state forms. So, and it's kind of a lifetime appointment. I guess I'm on it forever. So.
Thanks for doing it, Pam.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. There's not too many changes here, but I'm glad so many people were interested to come in and chat. Hi, Ken.
Hey, Pam, on line 83, it mentions that appraisal, it authorizes the lender. Was there any discussion to change that word to buyer directs lender to do it instead of just authorizes them to do it?
No, but there's been a lot of discussion on that paragraph because the first change, it was, you know, we're all concerned about delaying appraisals getting ordered, and that it needs to be part of the contract. It needs to be ordered within the timeframes in the contract. Shoot me an email of what you question that,
Yeah,
and
make
yeah.
that stronger.
Yeah, to make that stronger, that'd be great, because they changed it last year from what
Yeah.
it started out to be. I noticed that too. And I don't know whose suggestion that was. I think that was legal staff's, but I think it should be stronger, you know. We had buyers, agents, advocates on the committee that acted like, well, no, you know, we should delay if they want, and everybody pounced on them, said, no. It needs to be ordered. But anything like that, just shoot me an email. I send it to Rochelle, you know, our head attorney, and they're on it. You know, they collect all this information. Yeah, Lance?
This may be a little fringy, but I ran across a form recently that I expected to hear about today, but it looks like you're done. Something about, almost like if you're gonna write it off, I saw something in Docs recently, on a listing, that had something to do with, like, if we have a problem and somebody wants out of the contract, it's gonna go to arbitration, and there's dollar amounts involved, and it seemed really,
I had to see what that was, but it might have been a form agreeing to mediation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it,
It's voluntary, if somebody wants to agree to
I've
mediation.
never seen it before, so I assumed it was new, but
Oh,
they
no,
said maybe
wait a
it's been around.
No, there's a
We
lot.
discussed it in office, the Plymouth office is the one that's using it.
And the Fort Wayne
We've
board
got
really
action.
uses
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, they,
It seemed like really getting off to kind of a controversial start to me, but.
they really push mediation instead of everybody suing each other right away, or even, I mean, it's a specific process, you know.
Oh, it was very specific.
Yeah, there, if you look through there, and sometimes I don't realize what form, there's a lot of
Right.
forms in there, a lot of different things, but a lot of them you don't use very often or never use, you know. But, you know, if you have a question about that, sometime if you think there's a problem with it, just shoot me an email and they'll look at it, you know, they'll look at it. Or if you don't quite understand what it is, like have your broker call a hotline, you know, and have them tell you what the rationale behind it, but like Jim said, Fort Wayne did a big push for that form,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, that was easy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for putting in that time, Cam.
No problem.
That way we have
I
representation.
enjoy it, because I always learn so much from it, so.
No, I did not. I wasn't there. I haven't worked this much.